With more millionaires and billionaires in the world than ever before, demand for personal butlers is on the rise. But let's be real, the butler of today is a far cry from the silver polishing servant that's so often seen in the movies. Today, butlers are tech-savvy managers and problem solvers who just so happen to also know how to fold down a bed and recommend the best cigars. Along with the more traditional duties like serving guests and pampering their employers, butlers often set up, operate and troubleshoot technology, which is becoming ever more important with the rise of smart homes. They also schedule events and vacations and direct other staff members that their employers might have. And when they're not managing staff, sometimes they are the staff. One butler shares how one of his bosses was so inspired by the food he saw in movies that anytime he saw something that looked good, he asked his butler to make it for him. This butler often found himself in the kitchen watching online tutorials so that he could cook up fancy dishes including dumplings and homemade chocolates. In other words, in order to make the employer's life as carefree and easy as possible, a butler has to wear a lot of hats, and some of those require serious skills, which is why you might want to consider going to butler school to help prepare you for the job at hand. Yep, butler school is a real thing, and when you enroll, you can expect to learn skills like the fine art of pouring wine, serving dinner, and caring for fabrics, all while under the careful gaze of a veteran butler. But don't worry, at butler school, you're not just going to learn Victorian era butlering. Sure, classics like old school etiquette are still very important, but modern skills like personal styling, managing social media accounts, and sometimes even basic self-defense are also taught. What's more, if you're helping to run the household, you better also know how to manage teams of handymen, accountants, housekeepers, all with the help of a butler's modern best friend, an iPad. So how much does butler school cost? Well, the average cost for an 8-week butler training program runs at about $15,000, which is about $268 a day. That may seem like a lot of money, and for some it is, but for many butlers the cost is worth it. And I'm not just talking about the salary, which I'll get to shortly. If you're good enough and if you land the right employer, there's a lot of potential perks. Now, that will often depend on which family you're ending up working with. You see, there's a very real difference between new money and old money. For most butlers, old money tends to be better because the new ultra rich often don't have the same level of etiquette. As one veteran butler explains, when he landed a job with a supermodel and her husband, he soon quit because he found the atmosphere too casual and chaotic for his taste. You see, if you end up working for new money, there's a high likelihood that you're also going to find yourself in the role of a teacher. As one butler pointed out, those who have only just become wealthy often don't quite know how to act around butlers. One minute they might be crying on their butler's shoulder, and the next they might be ordering them around like a servant. Now, one thing that all butlers seem to value is a good story, and the longer you stay in the industry, the more stories you'll accumulate, each one crazier than the last. Take for example, one lifelong butler who worked for a sheikh for 2 years, acting as a manager on board his private yacht. The sheikh would sometimes hire prostitutes and bring them aboard for day-long voyages. This butler was responsible for making sure that no evidence of the escapades remained. And as you can imagine, when the sheikh's wife came on board, this led to a very interesting situation where the butler had to hide the prostitutes in his own personal cabin to avoid the sheikh being busted. And there's lots more crazy stories like that. For example, another butler explains how he was once sent to fly up to the mountains of Switzerland just to buy coffee. One guy who worked for a Saudi prince was responsible for negotiating the shutdown of one of Spain's most famous tourist spots, Alhambra, to ensure that his boss had sole access for an hour and a half. The cost? A cool 45,000 euros. But then there's also the smaller, more everyday requests that are no less outlandish. One butler was tasked with postponing a dinner party because a woman refused to eat dinner off porcelain, and everyone had to wait until her glass plates arrived from Europe. Or how about making sure that your client has enough milk so that she can take a bath in it? Now, of course, while some bosses might be more chaotic than others and might request more duties than others, as a butler, you will need to be on call 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. If your boss decides at 3:30 AM that he needs your help, even if it's for something as basic as turning off a light switch, you better be ready to serve him. And that probably explains why the divorce rate is so high among butlers. With all of the travelling and the long hours waiting on your employer, sustaining a long-term relationship can be difficult. As one butler admits, most butlers are either gay or divorced. If you want to be a good butler, you need to be dedicated to your job and your employer. And that brings me to one of the most important parts of being a butler: privacy. Just think about it. A butler has access to some of the most intimate parts of their employer's lives. Some butlers spend decades with the same employer. They often know everything about their habits, routines, behaviours, for better and for worse. In fact, being able to keep a secret is actually one of the most important skills a butler can have. As long as it's legal, a butler will basically do whatever their employer tells them to, and they won't go blabbing about it later. So, given all the duties and services they provide and the secrets that they keep, how much does a butler actually earn? Well, before we get to that, let me just double check. Have you hit that like button yet? If you're enjoying this video, show your support, hit the like button, and if you're not already subscribed, now's a great time to do that too. Now, back to earnings. In most Western countries, the average salary for a butler is about $40,000 a year. But here's the thing. Considering that about 80% of current job openings are for Chinese, Middle Eastern or Russian clients, there's a good chance that as a butler you'll find employment in one of those countries. In fact, China is the country experiencing the biggest upward trend in hiring butlers. In this giant communist nation, capitalism is certainly booming. In 2014 there were 65 billionaires, but today there are over 1,000. And if you land a job with one of these wealthy families, you can expect a pretty generous salary. You see, many of Asia's super rich elite are clamouring for that touch of Western elegance and status that a butler offers them. And that means a butler from Europe or the States can often expect to start out making about $60,000 a year if they work for a Chinese family, and they may also be trusted to run the entire household or even multiple households right off the bat. Keep in mind, as with any profession, the better you are at your job, the more money you're likely to earn. Some wealthy employers pay their butlers six-figure salaries. The highest paid butler currently is reported to earn $2.2 million a year. Plus, if you're lucky, you may get some pretty nice gifts. Take for example the butler that reportedly received the brand new Mercedes-Benz SL as a bonus, worth around $186,000. Not bad for someone who serves others for a living, wouldn't you say? Now, you might be wealthy enough to have a butler, but are you private island levels of wealthy? If you haven't already checked our video about the billionaires with the best private islands, I'll leave that on screen for you to check out now. You'll be surprised at which billionaire's island comes in at number 1. Go ahead, check that out, and if you haven't already done so, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for lots more videos.